have a now much smaller but wonderful full panel with 4 speakers who I will briefly introduce. We have Mohammed Ibn Shambas from Ghana, who is currently the SRSG, which means the Special Representative of the Secretary General and the head of the UN Office for West Africa and the Sahel. He has quite an experience in mediation and UN and AU peacekeeping, because he also used to be or was the AU UN Joint Representative for Darfur, and among other positions, he is a former president of ECOWAS, the regional organization for West Africa. We have, aside from him, Memduh Karakulukcu. He is a founding president of the Global Relations Forum in Turkey, which is an important think tank in that country. He's an engineer by training, which probably means, and an economist, which probably knows that means that he knows what he is speaking about, at least we hope so. And he will give us a Turkish perspective. Actually, I think his presence has become even more important through the developments of the last couple of days. We have at the end of the row, I'm sort of going west to east, Abdulaziz Sagar from Saudi Arabia, also the founder and president of a think tank in his country, the Gulf Research Center. In UN circles and circles who are interested in mediating conflicts, he's also known as a person who has been moderating the Syrian opposition meeting in Riyadh, trying to get a unified delegation of the Syrian opposition for peace talks together. Now, we didn't have peace talks then, but we had the delegation at least. And we have, last not least, Dong Manyan, the vice president of the China Institute for International Studies, himself a specialist in Middle East issues, who, among other things, has previously served at the Chinese embassy in Ankara, if I got that right. Abdulaziz, how is that with the external interference? Would the region be better off without?
Well, given the type of policies that the US is implementing in the region, which is a very confusing, and also giving the position of the other powers also, I think we will be happier without that intervention. What we need to see is a much more constructive engagement from their side rather than a destructive engagement, which is taking place now.
In any, I mean, to add another theater to the conflicts we're speaking about, in any confrontation between Iran and either the United States or its neighbors in the Gulf or Israel, whatever, Saudi Arabia would probably be at the receiving end, as it already looked when Saudi oil installations were attacked by whoever it was who attacked them. Saudi Arabia itself has come under closer scrutiny of the international community and also of its friends in the United States, particularly in Congress, related to human rights issues, the murder of our friend Jamal Khashoggi, the Yemen war, and it seems to have reduced its regional engagement a bit, not in Yemen, but in Syria, where also with your participation, Saudi Arabia was very instrumental at some point, very active. Has Saudi Arabia overreached a bit and now is trying sort of to limit its engagement, trying not to get into the limelight of international attention with regard to Yemen and human rights, and sort of withdrawing a little bit to trying to mend its own affairs, or is that a wrong interpretation?
Well, it's a bit complex, situation. I think if I look at the current situation in Yemen today, for instance, it is very much directly linked to the conflict with Iran, because without the Iranian support to this militia, which is to my surprise how the rest of the world and the community call them the de facto government or reality on the ground. If we are supporting a reality on the ground, a militia that threw a legitimate government and took over, and then we try to endorse those behavior, I think there is something wrong, because that's where do you stop and where do you put the limitation there. Saudi agenda today, of course, yes, we were involved in Syria. On the beginning, we tried to help the Syrian people to reorganize themselves. We extended a lot of support with the coordination with the international community. But I think on the Syrian situation, today it's more of the 3 levels have failed. The direct discussion on the Arab, circles have failed. through the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Country, have failed also that one. So it went into the international level. And once it is in the international level, it started in Syria as a request for a little bit of a freedom, and ended to a platform for a major international conflict zone that everybody trying to exercise their power, their interests on that territory. No, there is no disengagement in Saudi Arabia. I think the engagement is still there. But at the same time, if you look at today to the US agenda, you will say China, Iran, and then North Korea. If you look at the Saudi agenda today, yes, for me the first priority will be Yemen. I have 1,450 kilo borderline with that. And my second, of course, will be the Iranian aggression sort of policy, interventionist and expansionist policy that has been adopted to Iran. So I need to deal with that situation as a second priority. Of course, today, Iran, Saudi at a very strategic challenge in both border, north and south. Because in the north side, Iran, continuously supporting all the militia group, we call them al-Hashd al-Sha'bi in Iraq, which, they're fully funded, trained, supported by the Iranian Revolution Guard, and at the same time in Yemen. So, being in both sides and having also in the Gulf water, seeing the threat coming also, 14th of September is a changing name of the game. If the international community today is not condemning a real act, which I think the good thing that Europe at least recognized that despite of the strong relation between Europe and Iran. I was in New York and I was very happy to hear President Rouhani saying that he would like to have a new Hormuz sort of a regional security framework, which will be based in two principles. One is the non-aggression, and the second is the non-interventionist. This is what we have been suffering from regarding the Iranian policy. But what I will add to that we would like to see an international guarantor, a role for the United Nations to play the guarantor for such a policy to be implemented. If they are willing to do and to move toward real implementation of non-intervention and non-aggression, trust me, we will all be happy to move toward that regional arrangement, and we do not wish to see more international presence. Somebody like President Trump coming out and say, why do we need to be involved in the Middle East war? We should be out of that one. I think he's mistaken by two things. He has the two strongest enemy and a friend. Israel is the strongest friend for the United States, and it is within that Middle East geographical location, and Iran, which is his biggest enemy, or the second top on the list for him, is there. So by this engagement, or by having double standard, in one way, yes, you withdraw your soldier from the North Syria, but at the same time, you're willing to send 3,000 soldiers to Saudi Arabia, yet you will say we have agreed with the Saudi to pay for the cost of that one. If it's really a matter of cost and pricing and so on, maybe we should have an international tender and see who's the cheapest price and come up with the right RFP, and then see who will provide the better security at a cheaper rate, if that's the way. It is unfortunate to see such a policy coming out of the US, where we would have expected to see a much more real engagement in bringing peace and stability. What the invasion of 2003 into Iraq, did that really bring the stability to Iraq? Are we having a stable, secured, safe, unified Iraq today? We don't. So back to your first question when we start, is the involvement and the engagement of the external power, is it in the best interest or the worst interest of the region? It depends how that involvement play roles. Without a withdrawal of President Obama, red line as he called it, we would have not seen the Russian back into the region with such a strong desire and presence. And today in Saudi Arabia, we are receiving President Putin visit. So that makes it a much more complex scene in the region. So we will still, Saudi Arabia, they will be involved through the 4 different layers, of course, their own interest, with each one of the countries. Second, through the GCC, despite of whatever current situation in the GCC through the Arab League and through the OIC and then through the United Nations. So they have all this different, multi-layered. Saudi did condemn the Turkish, role in the north part of Syria. And despite of that, personally, I understand the interest of the different. I don't think Turkey would have taken such a step without consensus, at least, or I wouldn't call it consensus, but no disagreement from the different strong player in the region, being it Russia, US, and the other power there.
That could well be. I mean, you already pointed to that Saudi Arabia, compared to the Kurds in Syria, have the advantage you can pay for American soldiers, even though not many Saudis have probably fought in the Normandy, and they wouldn't have been called Saudis at that point. Anyway, I think there's one important point which I would like to stress, and I don't know how far you want to reveal things. I know that you are involved personally with your research center in second tracks with the Iranians. And without going into too much details you don't want to reveal, would you see real opportunities for de-escalation and security building across the Gulf based on the contacts you are having with the Iranian counterparts?
I think I was very pleased. I mean, WikiLeaks did leak the information, so it's not any more secret, about our track 2, which we have started in 2012. But at the same time, last meeting, it was in New York, end of September, after the General Assembly. My feeling today, since the Iranian came for the first time saying, yes, we will have a regional security based on the two, principle, non-intervention and non-aggression. I think, with a strong presence of the UN as a guarantor, as I said, it will be welcomed, and I don't think there will be any rejection from the Saudi side, toward that. And we have indicated very clearly, and also when we talked about, Yemen and how situation will be in Yemen, Iran realized that it is not even in their best interest, because they do also have a different militia, they do have, different groups. So if the international community start recognizing the role of the violent non-state actor and giving them a role to play, where do we stop there? Every country then will have its own problem in that one. But am I pessimistic or optimistic? I think it all depends on Iran today. Iran, if they realize that they can't live in a lake of hatred in the region, that they need to fix their relation in that one, and they need to address the various issues. They need to address issues from Hezbollah to the militia in Syria that they have created through the Afghani, Pakistani, and through the Iraqi also militia. They need to look at Al-Hashd al-Sha'bi in Iraq. They need to look at Al-Houthi on the south. If they change that sort of attitude and willing to be a response, because they have chosen, by the way, to deal with through this militia for two reasons. One, to support the regime that they want if they decided to, like what they did with Hezbollah in Syria. The second is to leverage with them, to use it as a disturbance tools that, the same thing, it's like what they did in Lebanon when they have delayed the government role in that one and became much more aggressive in that one. I think I would still call for a real major constructive global engagement, in solving a lot of the, regional problem that we have, starting from Libya all the way to Yemen, going through the whole things here.
Thank you. If, when it comes to our time schedule, so last remark by Abdulaziz.
Well, maybe I'd like to start by commenting a little bit on the Chinese side, just very quickly. No, it's okay. Until China started liberating their economy post-1991, yes, we used to have a very firm position from the Chinese when it came to 1956, 67, 73, 71. And but post that, I mean, lately, unfortunately, we start seeing much more interest from China in the economic side and the economic relation, the economic participation in the region. Yes, China import today 1,550,000 barrels a day from Saudi Arabia. Almost 17% of China import comes from Saudi Arabia, which is a very important. I myself take a lot of pride that I was one of the very few Saudi visited China in November 1980, when it was a different country at that time. But at the same time, what today might concern me, the Chinese have followed the Russian when it comes to the Syrian case. They have joined them in the veto that have on the Security Council without stating their clear position, away from the Russian, following them on such a decision and so on. But anyhow, it's a very important relation. We appreciate a lot of the Chinese position there, but yet we don't like to see a buyer and seller relation only with China. We would like to see a much more, holistic approach and a much more constructive approach from the Chinese.
Yes, the questions from the floor.
Yes, the floor. I will go through it very quickly. With regard to the North Africa and the Sahel. Well, when it comes to a country like Libya, Saudi Arabia would like to see a unified Libya, constitutional that, take in consideration everybody. Some of the Gulf countries have taken a step of intervention there. I'm not so sure whether it's based on their own interest or based on another alliances they have, with other countries, but at the same time, I can't speak on their behalf. I can see that, yes, Egypt and UAE is involved in Libya. Qatar and Turkey is involved in Libya. I think if we leave the Libyan, issue to the Libyan and we try to help them to come up with a much better structure will be better. In the Sawahil, yes, we are a big supporter for counter-terrorism issue, and Saudi have contributed to that, and we understand, the situation there quite well. On the Palestinian, no, it will remain to be the key issue in the region. I don't think the Palestinian is coming down in the list. Maybe there are, it used to be the only case, the mother of all cases and the mother of all battles, as they call it. But now we have many different cases at the same time. We have, many issues to deal with, but that would not, because otherwise, when we had the Arab Summit in Dammam in Saudi Arabia, King Salman called it the, Al-Quds Summit. Saudi continue to support the, Palestinian government with no changes there. Are we in support, not in support, with the deal of the century? I was one of those who met with Kushner when he came to Saudi Arabia, and when we talked to him, I don't think there is a real clear picture at this stage today that you can really judge whether the deal of the century has a clarity or not. Russian role, as I said, I will close it, don't worry. Russian role, as I said, if it wasn't the U.S. Declining, I mean, Russia will have their own difficulties. The Russian economy is almost the same size of Spain. Can they really afford that expansionist policy? Their trade relation with the region is primarily in military and some mineral, but not much. It's not like the Chinese. For instance, you will compare a 3 billion Russia trade with the region to almost 170 billion from China. That's a big difference on that one.
Abdulaziz, last word. We are getting signs that we are taking over time.
Can we really solve the nuclear issue? There is two divisions. There is the strategic and the non-strategic issue. The non-strategic issue, we are willing to continue with the Iranian. Hajj, Umrah, diplomat, establishing the relation, organized crime, maritime issue. All of these issues, we differentiate. The key issue, strategic issue for us that we will not compromise about it is their interventionist policy, their expansionist policy, and the JCPO, which include the missile program. The Iranian, they used to insist in linking them all together, but today, according to the last statement from Minister Zarif, he's willing to separate, he's willing to deal on the both sides. The last word, thank you. We need to thank the great country of Kingdom of Morocco for their hosting us and providing the platform. We need to thank Terry and all his team, for organizing the world policy. We're very happy with what you see. This is becoming the Davos of the international affairs.
Thank you for already